Now we'll move along to Amanda Hart.
Amanda Hart from 10 News.
Hi, Amanda.
This afternoon, the Coalition is releasing its policy costings after it refused to hand it in to Treasury because of this leak. Do you think that they should have handed in their costings to Treasury, or do you think that they, as the government's trying to suggest, that their numbers just don't add up?
Well, look, firstly, I have to tell everybody this, that we approached the Prime Minister's department to have our program costed with Treasury, and they said no. But we've costed it ourselves, and we've got some billions of dollars there, including from the mining tax, which is above our spending program. That said, it has become a farce, this process of Treasury costings. It was brought in by the Howard government, as big political parties in government do, to try and get the drop on the opposition of the day. But Kevin Rudd got elected instead. And now the Gillard government's using it to punish the opposition with the leak that occurred and so on, and it's become a farce. That's why we would fund the Parliamentary Library to have an economic assessment department which did the costings independently and which gave people a very clear outcome of the costings and gave advice to parties as well about how costings would turn out. I find it frustrating. I can't put a proposal to Treasury and get an answer about the costing of that. Is it fair that government does that, but we don't get that opportunity? No, I don't think so. As far as the opposition's costings are concerned, and I know they're getting they're releasing them this afternoon, Amanda. Well, you know, I think they'll be saying they're dinkum. I think the government will be saying they're a fraud. And I think the people of Australia will be saying we're fed up with this, we're going to vote Green.
Next question comes from Sid Marr.
G'day, Senator Brown. Sid Marr from The Australian.
Hi, Sid.
I guess I'm just a little bit curious to know if people vote Green, is what we see what we get? There's been a debate within the Greens on education policy and your attitude. You've taken a pragmatic attitude to private schools funding. And that's caused some problems in the party in terms of they want to stick to the existing policy. Now, I guess I'd like an assurance from you that if people vote for Bob Brown, they're going to get the Bob Brown Greens and not the hard-line Greens that want the platform at all costs. And what guarantees, you've got one vote in the caucus, so what guarantee, or the party room, what guarantees can you give that you can prevail and the reasonable approach that you've been projecting will actually be the approach that the Greens take? And secondly, could I invite you to release your costings and your savings later on today, like the Coalition is doing?
We'll give you an outline. We can give you an outline of those. On the question, I'm delighted with my Senate team. I don't know. Sarah might answer this. I don't know whether we've had a vote. We haven't. I keep an eye out. No, look, we have a very stable and hard-working parliamentary party room, and I'm looking forward to an expanded party room after this election. I have just announced a proposal for an extra $2 billion going into the public school system in Australia, but also a commitment to keep the schools building program going for the private sector as well as the public sector, the one threatened by Tony Abbott. I am a firm believer in the needs-based education funding model. Our education policy, which is to take from the wealthiest private schools to help the poorer public schools, is one that's there and being advocated publicised very greatly by our opponents, but it's a very reasonable formula. But now we've got here, by default, both the Labor Party and the Coalition refusing to raise money from this nation's resources to educate it. And I make no apology for this. We will negotiate hard in this coming triennium to get a massive injection of funds. I've talked about $2 billion here into the school system, and to get a better outcome for the tertiary system and the TAFE colleges as well. We are dedicated educationists. We know that if the nation's future depends on the education dollar and the quality of teaching and the wherewithal of teachers around this country. No other party has a commitment like we have to ensuring our education system prospers into the future, and that people who are left out, I mentioned Indigenous children with hearing problems, are catered for. So that's my commitment into this next period of government. All parties have differences. If you're around the family table, you'll note that people have differences of opinion, and they need talking through. And that's the wonder of democracy. You do it, and you come to a conclusion. And I accept that, and so do my colleagues. And the strength of the commitment we've shown during the last 3 years, I think, will show itself in the ballot box on Saturday, and that commitment will move on into the next 3 years to give this country a much more exciting future than it's going to get from either of the big parties when one of them is elected into office.
Next question is Laura Tingle.
Laura Tingle from the Financial Review,
Hello,
Senator. Hello. Just on two things. One of them, you've mentioned this additional funding for education would come from your proposed amendments to the mining tax. So my first question is, if you can't get those amendments up, how would you propose that additional funding be raised? And the second question is about truth in advertising. You're running ads here in the ACT at the moment saying that people should vote for the Greens to stop cuts to the public service. But in reality, the Greens can't actually do anything about those cuts to the public service because they don't go through the Senate, do they?
Well, two things. Firstly, on the second thing, the Greens are committed to protecting the public service and to valuing it, and to being able to say so. It gets a lot of a rollicking, but the public servants of this nation do it a great service. And it seems to me that every time a government comes along, they want to wallop the public service in the run to the election. It was Kevin Rudd with 3,000 jobs last time, and it was John Howard the time before that with tens of thousands of jobs to be cut out of the public service. They keep all the same senior advisors. They go for the middle of the public service, and the Howard cuts created a mini recession in the ACT. All I'm saying is we will argue very strongly against that treatment of the public service in the wake of this election. But I agree with you, if Tony Abbott is elected, if Senator Humphries gets back in the ACT, then the prospect of that cutback in the public service becomes much more real. No, it doesn't go through the Senate, but we are intending to get a good working relationship with the next government, and that will be high on our agenda. In the speech I just gave Laura, I proposed that we would, in the mining tax debate, move strongly to get an extra $2 billion under the mining tax from what the Gillard government is now proposing it will do in the next 3 years. And here's the reality of this. If people want an extra $2 billion going into the education system, vote Green, because there is a prospect that we will get a dividend out of it. But if you want education to be restricted in the way it is and the formula to continue and the pressure kept on teachers and all the inadequacies we know about in education kept up, well, vote for Labor or vote for the coalition. This is a real test on Saturday. And in the Senate, people should vote Green. And if you're in Melbourne or one of those other seats I've enumerated in the lower house, vote Green. Because it's not just a one-off $2 billion injection of funds into the education system we'll be arguing for. It's the whole spirit of getting education. I mentioned science and maths teachers as an example, onto a much better funding system. We should be at the front of the OECD instead of the middle of the pack, so that this nation, and the dividend is enormous for the nation's economy, so this nation has a much brighter prospect and the people out there get the education which will lead to their own personal fulfilment.